evening. It's so good to be with you right here on the India Development Debate tonight on ET Now. I'm Supriya, Shrinate, and with me is Sandeep, Gurumurthi. Now, India is adding jobs like never before, or so it seems, because in what comes as a big boost to the Prime Minister's promise in job creation, data released by the Employees Provident Fund Organisation shows that more than 3 million new jobs were created in a matter of 6 months to February 2018. Now, interestingly, the big data comes just ahead of the crucial Karnataka State Assembly elections, while the data comes handy for the NDA government, which is hoping to retain power after the 2019 general elections all across India. Independent economists say that the steady rise in job creation will provide the missing link for policymakers in New Delhi, but that perhaps is just one part of the picture.
That's right. Not all are amused. For instance, the government's critics point out that data only signals formalization of jobs and not creation of jobs. Some also question the timing of the EPFO release coming ahead of the crucial assembly elections in Karnataka. Questions are also being raised on the quality of jobs, which of course remains a big concern, and the wages that people are getting in this country. Interestingly, the EPFO data comes just days after the government announced that it has achieved 100% electrification of nearly 6 lakh villages in the country. So what do the EPFO numbers tell? Is there an overestimation or a hype created by the government's managers ahead of crucial assembly polls? That's the topic of debate tonight on the India Development Debate. Joining us on the show this evening, we've got a wonderful panel. Manish Sabarwal, Chairman, Team Leads Services and an expert when it comes to the labour market. Ravi Srivastav from the School of Social Sciences, JNU. Rupa Subramanya, economist, making her debut on the India Development Debate. And two representatives from the political parties. We've got Narendra Taneja representing the BJP and Sanjay Jha of the Congress party. I'm going to start off with you, Rupa Subramanya. How are you interpreting this EPFO data? Does the data, to your sense, reflect creation of new jobs or formalization of existing jobs? Because, you know, in some sense, that's what this debate boils down to, doesn't it?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. So quickly, the numbers that are coming from the EPFO, the problem is not that the data is wrong, it's the inference that people are making from the data. So the 3 million jobs at the most represents formalization of the workforce that has kept a pace for a few years now, and there was a spurt in formalization due to GST and demonetization. So what this really means is, so just to give you an example, when a company crosses a threshold of 20 workers, so if you've already employed 19 people and you make one new hire, that's 20 workers, that by law you're required to register those 20 people now under EPFO. So are you saying that there have been 20 new jobs created, or was there one new job created? So what this represents is that those 19 people who were previously working are now part of the formal sector, and that is a good thing. That is something that we should not mock, but that's not the same thing as saying that net new jobs have been created. And there was also, remember, there was an amnesty scheme under the EPFO which resulted in 5 million people being added to the database. So are we saying that 5 million new jobs were created? No. I think what happened was people who were not registered with EPFO but were already working are now being counted as part of the formal labor force.
Okay. Just hold your thoughts there, because let me get another view on the table before I move forward. And Ravi Srivastav, coming to you on the same question really. Rupa Subramanya gives her perspective, but does the EPF and the data reflect creation of new jobs or really formalization of the existing ones? Because this has really sparked a debate, and I think we need to address that question before we move any forward.
You know, it's very strange that the government has somehow taken these figures to mean a net accretion to jobs, but even the people who started this debate, the Ghosh and Ghosh presentation and paper, they very clearly say that this is a gross addition to jobs. So this is basically a gross addition to the payrolls and not a net addition to the payrolls. They have never claimed that this is actually a net growth in jobs. And at the best, what EPFO figures can tell us is whether, as the previous speaker said, whether formal jobs have been growing in the formal sector of the economy. But let me also tell you that it's very difficult to draw short-term conclusions from the EPFO data, because employers file their EPFO returns sporadically and after periods of time, sometimes after 6 months, it's very rare for them to file it on time, file it on a monthly basis. So, to infer any short-term trend from the EPFO data is very, very difficult. And the second thing is this, again the point has been made. If you read the papers from some mid of last year, June 2017, the EPFO commissioner actually made the claim that 10 million people joined the EPFO payroll because of the amnesty scheme. So, various things are happening. The EPFO scheme has been extended. It has been extended, for example, to the construction sector, to various other sectors. And as the formal sector grows, as the EPFO eligibility grows, as incentive schemes or amnesty schemes induce employers to register more workers, we will have more workers on the payrolls. But this does not mean that net employment is growing at a rate which is really unimaginable going by any other macroeconomic data.
Fair enough. Manish Agarwal, comment on that. I know you fundamentally believe that India does not have a job problem. India has a wage problem, and we will sort of come to that. But at the face of it, how are you looking at this data? And do you believe that this data is fundamentally consistent with, with other economic indicators in the economy?
Absolutely. I mean, there's an American politician, Daniel Moynihan, who once said, you can have your own opinions, but you can't have your own facts. Now, a lot of people throw around numbers of the labor markets, which are mostly based on survey data. For the first time, we started putting out administrative data. Survey data, you have to be very careful in India because 29% of Indians in the official household survey say they work for an enterprise with more than 9 employees, which has more than 9 employees. And official enterprise data, only 1.5% of enterprises say they have more than 9 employees. So this mistaken belief that administrative data is somehow always flawed and survey data is always right is not true. We have to use both of them to keep each other honest. Our survey data has been incomplete. The only true frame is the GSTN frame, which we are trying to move towards. So there was, this noise of labor market data always being wrong. I think the fundamental question you have to ask yourself is India's unemployment rate a fudge? It's 5%. I don't believe it's a fudge. I believe everybody who wants a job has a job. India's problem is formal jobs. So I don't understand when this poverty industry celebrates, the formalization going up as saying, well, these are not new jobs. Well, India needs formal jobs. We're increasing. If you think India's problem is wages, you will do formalization, urbanization, financialization, industrialization, and human capital. If you think India's problem is jobs, you'll throw money from helicopters, you'll mandate a 3-day work week, and you'll take away people's shovel and give them spoons. So I would say, India's problem is formal jobs. Formal jobs are going up. Nobody is disputing that. And let's focus on that because India's problem is productivity, and productivity comes from formal jobs.
Fair point indeed. I think productivity is an important point there. But I want to talk about data, and you were right to say people can have opinions, but facts and data is something that is sacrosanct. Naren Taneja, coming to you because you represent the treasury benches here. I just want to understand what numbers do we believe? What numbers should we go with? Because the Ghosh and Ghosh study says that the figure is at 7 million. Niti Aayog says the figure is at 3.1 million in 5 months. CMI says a little over 1 million. And Surjit Bhalla has actually pulled a rabbit out of the hat and he says the number is at 15 million. Which figure are we supposed to believe here?
No, I think that you have to look at all these numbers and look at the total picture, in a more holistic manner, and at the same time keeping in mind that we are a very vast country, home to 1.26 billion people. And many of us are actually entrepreneurs. Many of us are very innovative. And here you're talking basically, if you want to look at the job growth, job numbers only in terms of the cold numbers that you'd eventually get. So that process, as we all know, we are not a developed country. That process takes a very long time. And we are talking of the size of a country which is bigger than the continent called Africa. Here the lot of growth is happening. As you can see, let me give you an example. For instance, we are discussing about EPFO data. That's one. Then we also have, the fact that 10 crore people have taken loans under the Mudra scheme. 10 crore. And I'm sure they have taken a loan for a certain purpose, and there is certain criteria that which they are supposed to follow. And if you start your own business, chances are you create job at least for 1 or 2 or 3 persons. I mean, unless you want to dispute it for entirely different reasons, which could also be political among others. Now, this is what the scenario is. The fact is the economy is growing. The fact is, since we took over, we have added billions and billions into India's economy. And the fact is that, the people seem to be, we are a political party in touch with the people on the ground across the country, and we are getting the very good feedback from the people. I mean, there are people trying to build artificially narratives that there are no jobs, no growth, nothing happening. This, this doom kind of
Narendra
scenario.
Taneja, I take your point. I take your point.
I mean, anybody is entitled.
Okay, people will decide. Narendra Taneja, I take your point. I take your broader point, but anyone who's questioning these jobs or the data around jobs doesn't necessarily need to be politically motivated. It's a simple point I'd like to place there. But, Sanjay Jha, let's leave Narendra Taneja's argument aside. But I think Manish Sabharwal made a very strong point on the fact that whatever the number may be, the fact of the matter is we're seeing formalization of jobs, and that is a very important trend and one that we need to recognize, acknowledge and celebrate. Sanjay Jha.
Sandeep, I don't think anybody reasonable is objecting to the formalization of the labor force. I don't think that is an object of any, shall we say, disaffection here between the people on the panel. I do object very strongly to the use of the term poverty industry by one of your panelists before, which I think smacks of a very brazen urban elitism that I strongly condemn. I would expect some degree of sensitivity when we approach the issue of job creation, because there is no denying, and this is not anecdotal, but there are PhDs and engineers and MBAs applying for the job of peons all over the country, which by itself is a manifestation of the acuteness of the job crisis. Let me now answer your question on the EPFO issue. I'll tell you why this is a ridiculous proposition to buy into that entire debate. What did the government claim through Ghosh and Ghosh? That 70 lakh new jobs were created using EPFO data. Now the stock of the EPFO data is 919 lakhs. Now 919 lakh is the EPFO stock. But they are saying 70 lakhs were created last year. I'll tell you why this is incongruous and irrational economics. You are telling me that in 1 year of 2016-17, especially after demonetization and GST, India added 7.5% to the workforce over the last 70 years? In 1 year, we added 7.5% to the workforce. I think it's bizarre and outrageous. I think, at the very outset, you can say this is stupid. The second point is more important, that the EPFO data is, by the way, only about 15% of India's workforce. You're talking about a very limited size of the challenge that we have in terms of jobs. You know that the majority are self-employed. So end of day, when you look at this debate, you got to look at the one data that CMIE put out just around a couple of months ago. They said in India, you got 300 lakh people unemployed. Unemployed as in without jobs, with nothing to do, barring maybe some degree of self-employment in February of 2018. So you have a very huge problem. I don't think any one of us here will say that you don't have to have people registered. Companies should have more tax-paying people. There should be more social security, etc., etc. But the one factor that we should not ignore is that India is also becoming largely a gig economy. The people don't have social security. We are having a lot more people on contractual labor, which is why the angst and the frustrations on job crisis is now ballooning. So this is the reality of our times. Unemployment rate is not 5%, it's 6.1%. That is the updated data.
Okay, Sanjay Jha, just hold your thoughts there, because I have a very pointed question for Manish Sabharwal. And Manish, of course, you've been accused of, being too elitist in talking about the poverty brigade there. But let me just ask you, this whole debate that one has seen in the public discourse, in the public space, between the CMI data and Sujit Bhalla's interpretation, and then of course CMI has come back hard on this. Is this selective data cherry picking happening because there are elections right around the corner? There's one in Karnataka, and of course then we go into the general election mode.
I'm not a politician. I don't understand politics. But this is an outcome of a committee which was formed last year, in which Chair Arvind Panagaria chaired, which came to the conclusion that everybody has opinions and there's not enough data out there. So let's put EPFO, ESI data out there. And the notion that ESI and EPFO data is fudged is delusional because people put in cash. These are individual accounts. Actually, survey data being incomplete, people don't understand, but EPFO and ESI cannot be fudged. So this is not fudged data. And the reality is that, when people can accuse anybody of being, sort of elitist here, but the notion that India's 50% self-employment, or we're moving into a gig economy right now. We have been 50% employment since independence. And this is not self-employment, this is self-exploitation. And for the first time, we are recognizing that formal wage employment is something that has to grow. And we are now up to 25% of the labor force being in the formal sector. So this notion that 90% of India works informally is also delusional and wrong. And the notion that India is 5% unemployment or 5 or 6, because there are 4 numbers of unemployment, whether it's 5 or 6, you can only have one definition of unemployment. Because minimum wages is an arithmetical concept and living wages is a philosophical concept. I have a higher definition of living wages than my dad. My son has a higher definition of living wages. So the notion that you will have another definition of unemployment is wrong. You may say, may have a definition of underemployment. You may have a definition of poverty. But India's problem is not employment. Everybody who wants a job has a job. They just don't have the wages they want or they need. So I think, fighting yesterday's war is fine. Slanting data you want it is right, is up to you. But there are facts out there which says India is undergoing a massive formalization. And yes, it is possible to formalize 5 or 10% of the labor force in a period of 2-3 years, as EPFO data shows. So the notion that EPFO or ESI data is fudged, and I think that employment is fudged, these 3 numbers are not fudged. EPFO subscribers, ESI subscribers, and unemployment.
I take that point. Manish, I take that point. I don't think anyone in the panel is going to dispute on 2 things: that formalization of the workforce is great, and some steps have been taken. I'll come to you in a moment, Sanjay. Let me go to Rupa for a moment. So I take that point on formalization being good. I also take the point that no one's saying that this data is fudged. The question is on the interpretation of the data. Rupa, if I could come to you now, even as the Niti Aayog today has sort of jumped to the conclusion that it believes 3.1 million jobs were created in the last 5 months, and this has sort of put to rest all speculation on job creation. Yet the Niti Aayog itself earlier in a paper last year, if I'm not wrong, indicated that additions to EPFO database does not necessarily mean new additions to workforce. So at the heart of this debate, I'm going back to the point that I made earlier, and you heard Manish Sabharwal there saying that if this is probably the most credible data that we have out there, is this whole interpretation of what constitutes addition to the workforce.
Yeah, so just a few quick points on this. So when we say the heart of the matter here is that there are not very good estimates of the actual number of jobs that are created in the economy. We just do not have a good picture of the labor force situation in India. And this is the reason why we have these wide-ranging estimates. We have Balla saying 15 million jobs were created in just 1 year. Then we have CMIE, which says 1.4 million jobs were created in the same year. Then we have Niti, which is saying that 3.1 million jobs were created in 6 months. So that's about 6 million jobs in 2017. So you can see that there's a wide range of different estimates here, and that's the heart of the problem. We just do not have reliable, real-time jobs data, which a single source that could tell us this is exactly the number of jobs that are being created in the economy. Here is a basic reality check. If you claim that you've created 15 million jobs in 2017, that too in a year which saw the economy recovering from demonetization and a downturn due to GST, are you really saying that 15 million jobs were created in the formal sector when roughly 10 to 12 million people enter the workforce? That indicates we don't even have a jobs problem. There is no jobs problem. Everybody can pick jobs of their own choosing. We should have seen wage inflation as a result of this. So this just doesn't pass a basic reality check. And what we can comfortably say is that at this point there's formalization happening, but in terms of making wild claims about net jobs created, we just do not have a reliable picture at this point.
That's a fair point indeed. We do not have a reliable picture because look at the estimate that's ranging on jobs. Mr. Srivastava, if I may come to you, and for a moment, let's assume that all these jobs that are being spoken about, the various figures that are perhaps being created, let's go with that assumption. I'm curious to know which are the sectors where you see them getting created. Is it in consumption? I mean, which are the sectors that you would identify where this job creation is really happening?
So, to begin with, I personally feel that the job situation and the data that we have, the various sources that the data that we have shows that the job situation is very, very grim. I think that is, to come back to this whole question of survey versus administrative data, the world over, and certainly in, we rely on survey data in order to get estimates of the labor force, in order to get estimates of the workforce, in order to get estimates of the quality of the workforce. India is the last country in this region to start thinking of an annual survey and a quarterly survey. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka all have been having quarterly and annual surveys for a long period of time. Sri Lanka began their surveys in 1992. And the PLFS that we have planned now is a very, very scanty survey. It's the scantiest survey in the subcontinent. So the fact is that after 2011-12, we have made no credible claims to collect survey data. But if we compare the survey data sources that we have, the Labour Bureau and the NSS, the quarterly surveys, and they are reasonable surveys, you get a picture which points out to a very grim picture as far as the employment part is concerned. That's number one. Number two, this question of formality. Let me point out that the debate on formality, and I have been a member of the Arjun Sen Gupta Commission, as you well know, we have gone into this question, we have defined formality and we have looked at it very carefully. The ILO defines formality along two axes, not one. One axis is the axis of social security, the other is the axis of job security. And let me also point out in this context that Mr. Sabharwal also represents an industry which is the temping industry. So basically, if you look at, and I have consistently maintained in a number of papers, in the NCOS, in the Arjun Sen Gupta Commission, we use social security as a proxy for formality. But subsequently in all my papers, and for reasons that I have discussed in detail, I tend to use job security as a much more important indicator of formality. Be that as may, you can look at job security, you can look at social security. A large part of the organized sector and organized manufacturing today is informal in nature. A part of it, if it becomes formal, and if people start maintaining and paying Provident Fund, EPFO records are well maintained, that would be a very big positive. In that, I think everybody on the panel is one. But I want to point out that the employers have every incentive to fudge EPFO data. The reason is that EPFO data is also employment data. And the moment you show a person as being employed over a certain period of time, that person becomes entitled to protection under the Industrial Dispute Act, becomes entitled to gratuity, and so on and so forth. And which is why we have been conducting surveys at the field level, and there is a lot of mismatch. A lot of problems in the way the employers register workers for EPFO. A Ramlal becomes an Arlal, becomes a Raju, becomes something else, even if there is continuity of employment. Otherwise, breaks are given. So one would like to collate field level.
Let me interrupt you for a moment.
EPFO data.
Sure. Okay, I take that point. Let me interrupt you for a moment. Okay, I take that point, Mr. Srivastava. Let me interrupt you for a moment. A quick rebuttal from Manish Sabharwal, and then I'm going to Sanjay Jha. Manish Sabharwal, quick rebuttal from you to the points made there by Mr. Srivastava of JNU.
Yeah, I mean, the notion that this is people are sort of ignorant. There is no difference between a permanent and a temporary job. We pay 150 crores of social security a month. So the notion that unlike any country in the world, there is no difference in social security. And to my mind, when you say that India has the sort of scantiest sort of survey data, or people don't want to get into EPFO data, that's exactly why EPFO data is so important. That as EPFO data goes up, more people are being subject to gratuity, subject to labor welfare board payments, subject to ESI payments. So when you set your goals are very important. You don't want to treat the disease, you want to treat the symptom, you want to treat the disease. And India's labor market problem is the lack of formalization, because with formalization come many things and it's very desirable. So the notion that India's unemployment rate is a fudge or this EPFO data doesn't rise, to me is just ununderstandable. We've hired somebody every 5 minutes for the last 10 years. We've hired 17 lakh people, but we've only hired 5% of the kids who came to us for a job. So, you can fight yesterday's war of jobs, but it's better to fight today's war of wages. And that is about formalization.
Okay, fair enough. Sanjay Jha, only if I come to you, I know you had a point to make on the earlier intervention of Manish Sabarwal, and I'm sort of slipping in a question here because I know the Congress in some sense is in a comfortable situation because given the world, the dynamics of the labor market world over, the switch to automation, any government in power is going to struggle to create jobs, and the UPA's track record itself when it comes to job creation, despite seeing high growth on account of, global factors and on account of steroids given by the government, was pretty poor. So at the end of the day, do you acknowledge that the current political climate, the current economic climate globally is not conducive to job creation in any case?
Well, Sandeep, this is exactly the reason why I'm astonished as to why the BJP has to be so disingenuous and distort interpretation of what I believe is valid data, which is why you're having four, views in terms of what the employment rate has been. The truth is it is a global challenge. There is no denying that. The US President Donald Trump won because he promised America jobs, and that was a big issue in the election campaign. Now, it is a political hot potato. There's no denying it. But I'll tell you why it has become one. Because Narendra Modi and his party promised 200 lakh jobs per year, and that was one of the assurances on which a lot of youth of India voted for them. By now, you should have had 800 lakh jobs, right? 800 lakh jobs. And we are debating whether it's even 1 million. So the truth of the matter is this government has failed on job creation. I completely agree with you. Whether it's drones, artificial intelligence, big data, robotics, I mean, there is even, forget IT, even manufacturing is becoming more capital intensive. The truth is the government of the day has to recognize that and move towards finding a solution. And one of them should have been a bit of better focus on the MSME sector. I think what demonetization and GST did is to destroy completely what was actually at that point of time a burgeoning industry. It disrupted it. And don't forget that 84% of manufacturing jobs come from the MSME sector. Now today you have gone to a stage where the government is giving the spin. I believe Rajiv Kumar of Niti Aayog is saying that we have created jobs in Mudra. Now Mudra is just an old scheme repackaged where the average loan size is 43,000. For God's sake, if you and I take a loan of 43,000, we are going to create jobs with that. I mean, what are we talking about here? So I think at the end of the day, this is a very obtuse, shall we say, attempt by the government to try and give this impression that we have created jobs. And I think the culprit behind the discussion is not the panel members, it's the government. The government's intentions here seems to be, create another hype in the market, mislead it, create headlines. But, I'm telling them you can go ahead and do it because the ground reality is so different that it's going to catch up with you sooner or later. That's the bottom line.
All right, so Sanjay, okay, so Sanjay Jha from the Congress and Naren Taneja, I'm really coming to you. He believes the ground reality is completely divorced from the hype that the government intends to create around jobs. I mean, hype will just get you to some extent is Sanjay Jha's argument. So I wanted to respond to that charge. And I also want to ask you the question, this whole debate is around job creation. What about the quality of jobs being created in the economy? Isn't that as important an argument and as important a debate as the whole argument and debate on job creation itself?
Well, first of all, Congress spokesperson saying that is what's happening on the ground. Basically, he is talking of the reality on the ground. How do they know it? They don't exist in many states. They don't exist in Uttar Pradesh. They don't exist in Bengal. They don't exist in Assam. I can just go on and on and on. So what are they talking about? Where are they getting the information from? Look, the fact is the reason we are discussing this today is because Congress and some lefties, they're trying to build this narrative. It's a fact. You see, they just want to build this narrative. Mr. Chidambaram now says the next 2019 election is going to be on jobs. And at the same time, Mr. Kamal Nath, who is from the Congress party, he is saying his video in circulation today. If you want, I can show it right now. Where he is saying that even a panwala is basically a job, and if even a panwala, he takes a loan and sets up his business, creates jobs for others. That's Mr. Kamal Nath, because he understands business. He's a businessman. You know, so within the Congress, there are different kind of voices. The people who really know, that's one thing, and those who don't know, just empty rhetorics, they are talking what they are talking. The fact remains that people are getting jobs. Now, the fact remains also there are lots of people who are basically not necessarily getting the sarkari naukri as this culture which Congress promoted, but they are getting rozgar. They are getting something to do. They are able to take care of their needs. They are also able to take care of some of their other aspirations, and that is happening across the country. That's the reality, and that's the feedback that we are getting from the people. Mudra scheme, there are many others who have not taken the paisa from Mudra, but they have other solution they have found out, because the whole atmosphere, the ecosystem, the whole ecosystem we are building in the country is such that people can find a job for themselves and become entrepreneur. But that's sad. That's just a second. That point, but the Congress spokesman talked about the PhDs apply for that. These people who got PhD, let me complete. You didn't interrupt when Sanjay was speaking. So
quickly, please. 15 seconds, Sandeep.
Okay, point is, Sanjay Jha was talking about PhD. These PhD people, they did their PhD during their time. And the many people, whenever the government job opportunity comes up, they apply. It does not mean that they don't have job. In fact, on the contrary, 70% of people who applied for the railway job recently, they already have a job. They've got a job. But this mindset that sarkari naukri is better, maybe they are going to earn less when they join the government. But it's still that mindset. So we are also fighting with that, try to create a new culture so that people appreciate that those who want to be entrepreneurs do their own things.
I take that point.
Create that kind of environment. At the same time, those who want to do sarkari naukri, they can do that. We are creating job opportunities for them too.
Okay, fair enough. Sanjay, I can give you only 10 seconds. I need to go to Rupa very quickly.
Yeah, you know, Sandeep, if you look at the figures on gross fixed capital formation or private capital investment or credit offtake by the industries of India, they tell you the story. I mean, end of day, the government can only do so much, and the reason why this government has failed is because they have not been able to get private investment going. And the second point is when the Prime Minister himself says to the youth of India, the demographic dividend we talk about in fancy international symposiums and in various other chambers of commerce in India, when the Prime Minister says pakoda economics, and when their Tripura Chief Minister sells pan economics, and you have somebody saying hire a cow and you live throughout your entire life making substantial income, you have a problem. And let's recognize it. I don't know why Mr. Taneja is beating about the bush. It's a reality.
Okay.
We are all here sitting as responsible citizens debating a problem.
Okay, Sanjay, okay, Sanjay, I take that point. Rupa, this political debate surely tells you one thing, which is sort of, to me, and it's a very obvious question that comes to my mind is, what is it that's going to sort of, help us get data and not narrative when it comes to jobs? It suits the political class to spin a narrative one way or the other, and you always can. What is it that will get us, that will take for us to get data and not narrative when it comes to jobs?
Okay, so here is some data for you. Recently, 90,000 people applied for some, or 23 million people applied for 90,000 positions in the railway sector. There was another news story recently where 10 lakh people applied for 1,100 positions, and these were MBAs, engineers, doctors applying for a police constable position in Maharashtra. That is data for you, and that reflects that the quality of jobs in the economy are just not, there just aren't enough high quality jobs in the economy. And that goes to what Manish Sabharwal pointed to earlier, which is the problem here is not necessarily a jobs problem, but it's a wages problem. It points to productivity. You have 50%, another data, 50% of India's workforce is still in the agricultural sector, and the agricultural sector only contributes 13% to GDP. And these are all very low paying jobs. So this is all data that's important data that you cannot ignore when you're talking about jobs in the economy or the quality of jobs in the economy. Moving forward, I mean, as I keep pointing out, what we really need to do is we need to come up with some good real-time high quality survey data But unfortunately, in recent days, Niti Aayog has even stepped away from its own jobs task force report, of which Manish Sabharwal was part of, where they recommended improving the quality of household surveys. Now, Niti is saying that we don't really need to have labor force survey reports anymore because we can just rely on EPFO data. So we need to first figure out what exactly we want to measure here and how we want to go about it. And once we have that figured out, then we'll have a better sense of the job situation in India. But you cannot ignore the fact that there's a massive amount of underemployment in this country as well. I mean, these statistics that I quoted earlier on, with 23 million people applying for 90,000 positions in the railway sector, and these are highly qualified individuals. They should be working as MBAs, doctors, engineers. What are they doing in the railway sector? And that is part of the problem. And unless and until we don't address that, we're not going to really make it. It's just going to end up in a political slugfest with the Congress saying that we created this many jobs, and the BJP saying, hey, you know, Mudra is also creating jobs. The problem with Mudra is that, again, we have a measurement issue. How are you measuring the number of jobs created? Not every loan that you give out through a Mudra scheme results in a job.
It's creating a job. Right. No, that's a valid point indeed, and I don't think we can leave an issue as serious as this to just a political narrative and to be jabbed between politicians. But Mr. Ravi Srivastava, coming to you, sir, you know, Rupa was making a point about gainful employment, really referring to that. But according to this government, selling pakoras counts as a form of employment as well. And then, of course, you've got gems all the way in Tripura who say you can be selling pan. Why chase a government job?
Yeah, so let me say that there is one can't pit self-employment or let's say small businesses against paid employment. Both can be reasonably productive, both can give reasonable incomes, and both can give a reasonable quality of life. The question is what kind of self-employment or what kind of small businesses there are. And in India, we have large number of those. The problems with them is that they are undercapitalized, their productivity is very low, their incomes are very low. People self-exploit, work for 12 hours, 14 hours, 15 hours on very small businesses, which is not very different from the way the informal wage worker works 14 hours, 15 hours in a garment factory or in the construction site. So the problem here is really of quality of employment, low productivity and low incomes, in whether it is paid employment or whether it is self-employment. And I don't think there is a dichotomy and we need to focus on one kind of job versus another kind of job. The problems of productivity, the problems of income, the problems of quality of employment, the problems of safety and security are common to both kind of jobs. But the debate that we've been having over the past few months has taken the whole debate on employment back, I don't know how many decades. Since 72, 73, India has been conducting scientifically planned surveys, quinquennial surveys, and then we started having a midterm survey for some time in between the two quinquennial rounds. And now suddenly after 2011 and 12, we've hit a void. And we are being told use the Mudra data, use the administrative data on EPFO, both can supplement something. In the past, we've never used IRDP loans to count how many jobs have been created. We've never used PMROI loans to count how many jobs have, you know, self-employed, how many youth have become self-employed. And suddenly we are told, no, this is the right kind of data. This tells you how many self-employed youth we are giving jobs to. The EPFO data is very good data because after all we need to look at the continuity of employment and social security. But it can only supplement a good survey, a good labor force survey. Everywhere we need estimates of the labor force, of workforce, how many people under social security net, of occupational safety, of underemployment, of unemployment, and all these figures can only be gathered through a good survey. As I pointed out, somehow there is no focus on now a labor force survey. As my previous speaker pointed out, you know, that the survey that is being planned, PLFS, we don't even know which way it is going. But if you look at the schedule of PLFS, it's a very, very scanty survey. It hardly gives you the kind of information you need. This country doesn't even have a single survey on occupational safety and health. How many people die in the sewers of this country every year? How many people die by falling off construction sites? We don't have a single data source to tell us anything about this.
Okay. I take your point there, Mr. Srivastav, and I think we've debated and you made your point there on why we need that survey mechanism. In a sense, you believe we're going back several decades by doing away with that. But just to take the debate a little ahead, and Manish, I want to come to a point that you made at the start of the debate. And again, let's try and look for some solutions. So you're basically saying India does not have a jobs problem, India has a wage problem, and according to you, what we need is formalization, urbanization, industrialization, and financialization. One would argue, haven't we already seen a series of steps in that direction over the last couple of years since this government came into power? And so what more needs to be done? Why haven't we yet reached the desired sort of outcome? Or is it such a challenging task that it will take a lot of time for us to see some sort of a desired results?
But you are seeing the results in the increase in formalization and EPFO. I mean, nobody on the panel is denying there's a huge increase in formalization, and I believe it is a consequence of GST demonetization and many other things. But I wanted to make that point through two things. This has been thrown around a lot. 23 million people applied for a government job of 10,000. That is because of the government wage premium. The government pays too much at the bottom of the pyramid and pays too little at the higher of the pyramid. So 90% of people, we just dived into the data of people applying for these jobs in railways already have a job. Second, it kept coming up, graduates are applying for a peon's job. The world has produced more graduates in the last 35 years than the 800 years before that. So what does that mean? 60% of taxi drivers in Korea have a college degree. 31% of retail checkout clerks in the US have a college degree. And 15% of high-end security guards in India have a college degree. So this entitlement of graduate hai, peon kyun ban raha hai, let's just give it up. A job is a job. Usually non-graduates are more hungry than graduates in my world. So I would say it's wonderful that this debate is happening. As long as we continue on the path of formalization, financialization, urbanization, and industrialization, we'll do it. Our unemployment rate is not a fudge. Everybody who wants a job has a job. We've solved that problem. Now let's solve the wages problem.
Okay. So jobs is not a problem according to Manish Sabharwal. We need to focus on the wages problem, and that will take care of gainful employment. But let me take this across to Rupa Supriya once again. And Rupa, many argue that labor laws are inhibiting factors to job creation, but the government recently did make changes to the contract labor policies, giving flexibility to employers. Are these the kind of steps needed? And more importantly, is this enough for more jobs to be created? Is this enough incentive for industry to create more jobs, and what more perhaps could be done?
No, your question is an excellent one. So one of the problems that is an obstacle really is lack of labor reform, and the recent step towards the contract labor reform is a welcome step, but it remains to be seen how this will help. So the point is that for us to really, if you look at China, for example, Foxconn in China employs like 2 million Chinese workers. We are still debating whether we should, if the threshold for hiring and firing workers is 300 workers. And contrast that to Foxconn in China, which is able to employ thousands of workers in its factories. So this is the heart of the labor reform problem in India. We just haven't been able to move forward in reforming labor laws. This government has attempted, but then there's a lot of there are protests from the unions, from even within their own party. So there are definitely challenges to it. But labor reform is one important step that needs to be paid more attention to.
Sanjay, come in on that. We all want more jobs to be created. We all quote, figures on gross fixed capital formation and lack of private investment and whatnot. And yet, when it comes to taking the tough decisions that will enable job creation, there is just no political will. I mean, the government took a small but significant step in amending rules when it comes to contract labor. Its own trade unions, like Rupa pointed out, didn't support that move, created a furor. And, I can't imagine the Congress party ever supporting a move. If the UPA were to come back to power, unlikely that the UPA would move on labor reform. So, there are these tough decisions that need to be taken for us to really move forward on jobs.
Sandeep, I'll take you back to the incident that happened with Maruti in Manesar a couple of years ago. I mean, if I were to take the definition of Mr. Sabharwal, all those in contract labor there were part of the formal employment roles. Yet you saw that they got violent. The manifestations were really ugly, and people died. You know what happened. I mean, end of day, security, as Mr. Ravi Srivastava pointed out, is a big thing in our country. You see, we are not yet that full-fledged capitalistic economy where one can do by just kind of existing by market forces. America has, I mean, a problem even today, despite having a very established social security network or say social security nets. In India, we haven't been able to do that as yet. Healthcare, education, basic amenities are yet at a premium for an ordinary citizen to get. I mean, so we should be very conscious of that. I think end of day, I'm sure Mr. Taneja will agree with me that he and I are on an English channel debating sitting in Mumbai and Delhi, but India is a lot more complex than the kind of things we talk about. There are people living in Odisha. There's a person whose wife died and he could not afford an ambulance, and he took her on a bicycle for 20 kilometers. These are not anecdotal stories. They are somewhere a story of India. And we need to recognize that. Even today, I know for a fact there are a lot of people with great talent for private sector who will choose to go to a government, choose in the IS or the IPS or work in a state-owned bank because they believe security matters. So end of day, I think when we are grappling with this situation, we need to recognize that the private sector and the public sector and the government have a role to play. The problem has been that we have been myopic. I'm not going to make a political point here. All parties have to do a lot more. I will concede that point. But I do feel that Mr. Modi's government took their eye off what should have been a very pressing target for them, not just for political dividends, because I think India's young deserve a lot better.
Okay. I'm so glad you say that India's youth deserves a lot better than this being made into a political narrative and a political debate, but it is politics at the end of it all. And Narendra Taneja, final question to you then. Will Mr. Modi, his tenure, his government in 2019, will it be judged only on jobs? Because yes, we agree, macroeconomic stability, getting the fisc and everything else in order is very, very important. But does it win votes? It is, after all about jobs at the end of the day, is it not?
Well, but that's precisely what we have delivered already. If you talk to the ordinary people, I mean, they will give you completely different story. And that's why we are not really, hassled by the narrative which Congress is trying to build, everything around the jobs. And their own leader like Mr. Kamal Nath, he is talking about pan economy. Just go, if you don't want, I can send that video to you. So the point I'm trying to make is that we know what we are talking, and we are very happy that Congress actually wants to build the entire narrative around this only, and is going to fall flat because there is no truth in it, there is no meat in it. So, but the point at the same time, I admit that we are a developing country. We have not become the United States of America or Sweden or Germany. China is struggling on the same, on the same point. We are also struggling. We are a developing economy. I admit it. And for instance, one of my co-panelists talked about the 90,000 jobs in railways. The question is, why don't you look at this way that we have created 90,000 jobs? 90,000 jobs we have created. In fact, the jobs number is 1 lakh. And the major 90% of the people who are applying are the people who already have a job. If you want, I can furnish 29. My entire personal staff has applied for that. And they are quite comfortably, but they all applied. Now, this is what is happening. But to conclude, to conclude, the point is that we have taken,
very quickly, Narendra, we are running out of time. Very quickly,
we are expanding the economy. We are creating an open and free, business-friendly environment. At the same time, we are making sure that every single person, whether public sector, private sector, formal economy, informal sector, his basic interests are taken care of one way or another. That's our main focus. In terms of reforms are concerned, whether in the labor or in other ways,
I take that
we
point,
are addressing
Narendra
them systematically in such a way which is compatible with India's ground reality.
We are living in denial.
Okay, I take that point. At the end of the day, narratives won't get anyone too far, whether it's the BJP or the Congress. Real jobs will. We live in difficult times, let's face it. What we need is labor reforms. What we need is more accurate and reliable measurement of data that cannot be contested in a debate like this. And at the end of the day, let the people of this country decide on whether or not the government has delivered on its jobs promise. Can't thank this wonderful panel enough. Manish Sabharwal, Rupa Subramanya, Ravi Srivastava, Narendra Taneja and Sanjay Jha for joining us on the India Development Debate.
Indeed. Thanks very much for being with us. We'll take a quick breather, but there's plenty more of news, analysis and views that continues right here on ET Now. You've got to stay with us.